The air in the courtroom was so tense, you could almost hear hearts pounding. Every seat was filled. Reporters, families, spectators, waiting for the verdict in what had become one of the most polarizing trials in Atlanta's history. But then, something happened that no one could have predicted. The jury forewoman stood up, interrupting the judge mid-sentence. "Your Honor," she said firmly, her voice trembling just enough to make the room lean in, "the jury would like to hear from the defendant himself." The judge froze, her gavel hovering midair. You could almost feel the confusion ripple through the courtroom. That never happens. Defendants don't just get called to speak after closing arguments begin. But this case, this young man, was different. And by the time Marcus Reed opened his mouth, nothing in that courtroom would ever be the same again. 24-year-old Marcus Reed had barely spoken a word throughout his trial. Every day, he'd shuffle into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, eyes low, face unreadable. Some saw guilt in that silence. Others saw fear. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He was calculating, watching, listening. He'd grown up in one of Atlanta's rougher neighborhoods, a place where silence wasn't weakness. It was survival. His mother, Denise, always told him, "Boy, your mouth can get you into more trouble than your actions ever will. Choose your words like bullets. Use them only when you need to." And that's exactly what he'd been doing since the day they arrested him. It started one rainy evening 6 months earlier. Marcus worked as a mechanic at Denton Auto Repairs, owned by Charles Denton, a man known around town for being both respected and ruthless in business. Marcus had done after-hours work, repairs, engine rebuilds, for Denton's private collection of vintage cars. He was promised $3,000. But when payday came, Denton forgot. Marcus tried to be patient. 2 weeks turned into 3. Bills were piling up. His mother's medication wasn't cheap. So one night, he decided to drive to Denton's house and demand his money face-to-face. He never expected to walk into a nightmare. When he arrived, the front door was open, the TV was still on, and Denton was lying in the living room, dead. A single gunshot wound to the chest. Marcus froze. He rushed forward, his hands trembling as he checked for a pulse. None. That's when he heard the sirens. A neighbor had called 911, saying they saw a black man with a gun in the house. Seconds later, Marcus was on the ground, handcuffed, shouting that he didn't do it. But the police weren't listening. Detectives found Marcus's fingerprints on the gun. They found his car near the scene. And witnesses claimed they'd heard him arguing with Denton just days earlier. To them, it was an open and shut case. To Marcus, it was a nightmare. When he tried explaining that the gun wasn't his, that he only picked it up after finding the body, they dismissed it as a lie. He was booked for first-degree murder. But something about the case felt off. For one, no gunpowder residue was found on Marcus's hands, and the trajectory of the bullet didn't match someone standing over the victim. Yet the prosecution ignored those inconsistencies. Their story was simple and damning. Marcus Reed was angry about money. He went to Denton's home, confronted him, and shot him. Case closed. By the time the trial began, the media had already painted Marcus as a violent criminal. Headlines read, "Mechanic turns murderer. Angry employee kills employer over pay dispute." The prosecution's lead attorney, David Sloan, was known for his dramatic flair. He strutted into the courtroom every morning like he was performing for a camera crew. Every witness, every objection, every closing remark, he played to the audience, not the facts. Marcus's defense attorney, Rachel Hayes, was the opposite, calm, methodical, and visibly frustrated by the biased coverage. She believed in Marcus's innocence, but she was fighting an uphill battle. The first 2 weeks were brutal. Every witness that could have helped Marcus was either intimidated, unavailable, or discredited. Even Marcus's old co-workers, people who once called him a friend, refused to testify. It seemed like the world had already decided his fate, and so Marcus stayed silent. On the 3rd week of trial, Rachel approached Marcus during recess. "Marcus," she whispered, "we can still win this, but you need to take the stand." Marcus shook his head. "No, they don't want my truth. They want to show Then give them one, she insisted. If you don't speak, they'll see your silence as guilt. But Marcus stayed firm. I'll speak when it matters most. Rachel didn't understand what he meant, but deep down, Marcus had a plan. He wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was fighting for something bigger, the right to be heard. It happened during the final week of the trial. Closing arguments had begun. The prosecutor was wrapping up his fiery speech, painting Marcus as a dangerous man who thought he could take justice into his own hands. The jury sat quietly until one woman stood up. It was Lisa Grant, the forewoman. "Your Honor," she said loudly, "we'd like to hear from the defendant himself." The courtroom exploded with murmurs. The judge's gavel slammed. "Order, order, Ms. Grant. The jury cannot request testimony." "With all due respect, Your Honor," Lisa interrupted. "We've listened to everyone else, but we haven't heard the man whose life is on the line." Silence. Even the prosecution didn't know how to respond. The judge sighed, rubbing her temple. "Mr. Reed, you are not obligated to testify, but if you wish to, I'll allow it." For a long moment, Marcus didn't move. Then he stood. He walked slowly to the stand. His chains rattled softly. He looked at the jury, then at the victim's family, and then he spoke. His voice wasn't angry. It was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes from pain too deep to shout. "I didn't kill Mr. Denton," Marcus began. "Yes," we argued. "He owed me money for work I did on his cars. But I went to his house that night only to talk. The door was already open. I thought something was wrong. When I walked in, I found him on the floor." He swallowed hard. "I picked up the gun because I panicked. I didn't even realize what I was holding. Then the police came, and that was it." He looked at the prosecutor. "You said I went there to kill him, but you never asked why I didn't run, why I called 911 before they arrived." The courtroom went still. Reporters froze mid-scribble. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Marcus continued. "The truth is, I was raised to respect people, even when they don't respect me. I try to do the right thing. But to you, I was just another angry black man." His words hit like thunder. The prosecutor tried to object, but the judge held up a hand. "Let him finish." Marcus's voice trembled. "You can judge me by what you see, but I'm not the monster you've made me out to be. I'm just a man who tried to help and ended up fighting for his life." The jury deliberated for only 22 minutes. When they returned, Lisa Grant's eyes were red from tears. The jury found the defendant not guilty." The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Marcus's mother wept uncontrollably. The prosecutor just stood there, speechless. The judge's voice softened. "Mr. Reed, you are free to go." Marcus looked at Rachel, his lawyer, and whispered, "Told you I'd speak when it mattered most." As he walked out, sunlight poured through the courthouse doors. For the first time in months, he felt air without walls. Marcus's story spread across the nation. Talk shows debated whether juries should have the right to request defendant testimony. Law students studied the case. But for Marcus, it wasn't about fame. He opened a small auto repair shop in Atlanta called Second Chance Motors. He hired people who'd been wrongly accused, giving them jobs, hope, and a place to rebuild. When asked what message he had for others, Marcus simply said, "Sometimes the truth doesn't scream. It just waits for someone to listen." The courtroom didn't just shake that day. It changed. A jury's courage to question procedure. A man's decision to finally speak. And a nation reminded that silence doesn't always mean guilt. Because justice isn't just about laws. It's about listening. And on that day, they finally listened to Marcus Reed.